Hi everybody, my name is Gregory Taylor and I'm the teacher librarian at Hillside Junior High School in Boise. And I'm here today to talk a little bit about book talks, and especially book talks on screens. I don't know about you, but I've done way more book talks on screens in the past year than ever before in my entire career. And I'm guessing probably a lot of you have too. Whether that's in a Google Meet or Microsoft Teams or Zoom or something else, or it's pre-recorded into a video clip, we've all been doing a lot of screen time in the past year. And you know, people have talked about what are we going to keep from the pandemic? What are we going to learn from these COVID times? And maybe we'll stick around. And I think book talks on screens is one of those things that maybe will hang around, and some of the lessons we've learned from doing those. We are all eager to get back in person with students in our classrooms and libraries and do book talks in person and library lessons in person. But there's definitely a place for book talks on screen. First of all, booktubers have been around in the YouTube community for over a decade, and there's now a thriving book community on Instagram and Instagram Reels and book talkers on TikTok. And you maybe have not jumped into all of those communities yet, but definitely there's a time and a place for book talks on screen. So first, just a few technical details that probably you've heard before and many of you are even more adept at than I am, but some things I've learned or other people have taught me about doing these sorts of on-screen talks and book talks. First of all, you want to get your camera up at your eye level or maybe even a little bit higher. It just makes you look a little better, and it's a little bit more of a natural eye line for the people who are listening and viewing. So right now I'm sitting at a table in the Hillside Library, but my laptop is actually propped up on several big fat reference books so that I can get my camera up right about here where I can talk to you straight on. So, you know, if you're using your phone or a laptop or a webcam, see if you can get it at about eye level or a little higher, and that'll give you a better picture. Also, I learned this trick a few months ago. You want a fairly light colored surface beneath you to bounce some light. You probably have a slender, elegant neck and a crisp jawline, but I do not. And for people who do not, just a little bit of bounced reflective light from underneath works better. So I'm at a fairly light colored table, so I'm not doing anything special, but when I'm at home and my dining room table is fairly dark, I put down a couple pieces of paper or a piece of white or light colored poster board. And when I learned that trick, it's amazing how much that just improved my look, which, you know, I'm a little vain, maybe you're not, but I appreciate those tips and tricks. Also, you'll notice I'm not centered in my screen. It's just a little bit more visually interesting to have something over here that isn't me, like all these bookshelves and our comfy chairs and everything. Although you have to be careful, you know, if there were a bunch of junk on this table that I'm just sort of blind to anymore because it sits there all the time, that could be distracting to viewers. Or if there's some kids back here in these chairs goofing off, or there's a classroom pet hamster running on its wheel constantly in the background, just be conscious of those other things. Another benefit of this off-center framing that I'm using for book talks specifically is that I can show off a book in this space here and give a great chance to show off covers and titles and maybe even features of the pages inside. So with all that said, let's get down to actual book talks. One of the things I try to always do in person, of course, but I think it's important that we do it on video as well, and sometimes video works even better for it, is to show the cover of a book, especially if it's a very visually appealing cover. I think a book talk should always start with the title and author of the book and end there too, so readers who are listening and want to track down that book can do it. If it's a pre-recorded video, of course they can just replay it, but even in person, I think that's helpful. And in person, a lot of times you can just set the book on a table in front of you while you're talking, or you're holding it. Kids can come up after the fact and pick up the books you talked about and look at them. But in a video, it's important to really give some good solid time to that cover. So if you've got an intriguing cover like this one, which doesn't even have a title on it, just some intriguing pictures, and the back cover doesn't really even tell us anything either, just some more intriguing pictures. But this book is called The Barnabas Project, and it's by the Fan Brothers, and I can show off that cover, and maybe even we can have some discussion about, you know, what's going on here. Another thing I love about book talks on video is that you can show off visual details like these end papers, and everybody gets a front row seat. You don't have to walk around a classroom or expect people to notice small details from far away. And people can also, that applies for pictures and features inside the book too, like this picture of Barnabas from the Barnabas Project. And this says here, Barnabas lived in a secret lab. He was half mouse and half elephant, but he had lived in the lab as long as he could remember. Oh my goodness. And so if you show a page like that, and then a page like this from the lab where they make perfect pets, except Barnabas had been put in a part of the lab called failed projects. Who wouldn't want to read The Barnabas Project by the Fan Brothers, especially with such intriguing pictures and a setup like that? So definitely showing off the cover and showing off the title at the beginning and end of a book talk is a super useful thing to do. I also think you want to keep it brief. I'm kind of long-winded if you haven't figured that out already, and I can go on and on in book talks because I get so enthused about the books. But I think one thing I'm going to take from my video book talks back into even my live book talks is that I don't need to tell a ton of plot. And I can keep things really focused and really moving along and talk about the things about a book that particularly appeal to me as a reader. I think the best book talks are the ones that are fairly personal because either kids are going to connect to that book for the same reasons or they're going to catch your enthusiasm. So, those appeal factors are not necessarily always the plot. They could be something about character or something about setting or even physical features of the book. I mean, if I'm talking about Dragon Hoops by Jean Lewin Yang, I mean, one of the things right off the bat is that the book looks like a basketball. And even under library plastic, the book feels like a basketball. So kids who love playing basketball and know what that feels like to have a basketball in their hands, this book is going to give them that tactile sensation that they love so much. And then, of course, it's a graphic novel. So you got to show off some of the amazing pictures and some of the action shots. This is a nonfiction graphic novel about the high school where Jean Lewin Yang worked as a math teacher and didn't know much about the basketball team, even though it was one of the most famous and winningest basketball teams in all of the state of California. And lots of superstars had come out of this school. And so he gets interested. He feels like he should know a little bit more about this awesome basketball team at his high school, even though he's a math teacher and not a coach and not particularly interested in sports. So people who love basketball are going to love this book for the basketball scenes, for the history of basketball that they're going to learn in reading this book. But non-basketball fans are going to love it too, because they can follow along with Gene's own journey, which is kind of a frame device he uses throughout the book to talk about his own becoming a basketball fan through the school where he worked. It's called Dragon Hoops by Jean Lewin Yang, a Prince Honor book this past year, and one of my favorites of the past year. Going back to those appeal factors, if I'm talking about Love and Leftovers, I might talk about, yeah, it kind of looks like a fat book, but the page size is small, and it's a novel in verse, and I can show some pages. If people don't know what a novel in verse is, it's like, yeah, it's written all in poems. So lots of white space, lots of pages where there aren't very many words at all, And so it's actually a much quicker read than you would expect, and you can feel proud that you read this big fat book so quickly and enjoyed it. Another thing I'm going to mention for sure is that Sarah Tregay, who wrote this book, used to live in Boise. And the whole last half of this book is set at Boise High School. And so as the kids are walking around after school downtown, getting bagels, going to the bandshell in Julia Davis Park, walking across the street to the public library, you know, a lot of Boise readers can picture those scenes, can picture those settings. And that's a big part of the fun of this book, in addition to the great characters and the awesome plot. You know, read-alikes are a huge appeal, especially for kids. You know, they find one book they love, and then they just want more books like that. And that's why we love series and those prolific authors who have so much to say. But I can show off a book like The Testing, and I don't really even have to say anything about the plot or the characters. I can just say, you know, you can probably even tell from this cover, they're kind of trying to copy the Hunger Games, because this book has serious Hunger Games vibes, but mixed in with some Divergent and maybe a little Maze Runner. And that right there is going to hook in those readers who've read all of those books and are like, ooh, another one in that vein. Maybe I want to read that next. So those are just some of my tips for doing a good book talk, either live or on video. And I can't wait to see some of your book talks on video. And yeah, good luck with those. Thanks for listening.